What's up, guys? Adam back again with another deck tech. This is going to be part 2 of our kind of ongoing breakdown of meta decks leading up to the reunion event, which is taking place January 12th in Florida. We figured it kind of makes sense to go through these meta decks leading up to, probably what's going to end up being one of the bigger Opus 7 events. Today we're going to talk about Wind Water deck. It recently just kind of won Wales, so this is kind of our take on that deck. It's pretty similar, not too many differences. So let's go ahead and look at the deck list. So if you look at the full deck list, it's pretty typical stuff. We're seeing a lot of the same stuff that we actually saw in our mono win list, because those cards are still really good. Along with, the YRP package, and, a couple other cards that are water cards, obviously, so they weren't in the mono win list. So let's go ahead and take a deeper look at each individual card. So first up is Chalinka. Kind of went over this in the last deck tech that we did as well. She's going to buff all the damage that your Crystal Chronicles characters do by 1,000. That includes herself. Her second ability is going to do 1,000 to everything, 1,000 to all forwards opponent controls when she enters the field, which is effectively 2,000 as long as she's alive when it resolves. And then when she forms a party with Yuri, she's going to choose a forward or monster and break it. Not much more to be said. She pairs really well with Yuri. We're running 3 of each. She's going to be able to wipe out a board of Vikings if we have to. Sometimes that ping damage added on with like a Barbarita is just going to finish the job. She's just a solid card all around, and anytime you see Yuri and you're running Wind with Yuri, you're going to see this card. Next up, we got Halicarnassus. It's just a one of. This is a very strong card that came out of the newest set. When she enters the field, she's going to blank everything. That's going to get rid of problematic stuff like Dot Luma, like Zidane. It's going to allow us to target them with our abilities after she's blanked them. And then her last ability, while you're not going to use it a lot, if you have kind of 2 dead summons in your hand and she's been out for a turn, you could just dull her, discard 2 summons, and choose a forward and break it. So that's going to be really good as well. Then we have Pain, the starter. Essentially, this card's free and it's going to draw you a card. As long as you have, Yuna and Riku out, this card's going to be really insane. It's just a free body that draws a card. It's pretty nuts. You could also kind of do some trickier stuff where if you tap some other backups to do something, say you tap Alhanalem to do some damage, and then you play Pain off of one backup, discarding card. As long as you still control Riku and Pain, you can still activate those backups, even though you didn't use them to cast Pain. So you can do some kind of cool stuff with that. And then moving on, we have another Pain. This Pain's the EX Burst. Don't let the power level fool you of this card. We just want to play this card to get our backups. I mean, the fact that this searches for backups is really crazy. Getting Yuna onto the field as soon as you can is going to be really relevant. Even getting Riku down in some matchups to kind of force your opponent to play your game because they have to fear being just milled out slowly is going to be really good. And you want to get these 2 down so that your other Pain is going to get the draw on the ready, and then also your Valivore is going to become stronger once you get those down as well. Also, it's an EX Burst, so even if this comes off the top, you're still getting a card, which is always going to be great. Then we have, Wind Staple, Y'shtola. You're not going to really see a Wind list without this card in it. We're running a full 3 here. This card just protects what you want to be doing. It makes it hard for your opponent to play. Being able to just cancel a summon at the cost of breaking this is going to be really great. Also, the fact that she can cancel auto abilities lets us go wide without much fear of Shantoto. It forces the opponent to kind of kill this and then do something else if they want to be able to do it. There are cards that can kind of get around her, like Halicarnassus that we're running. You could blank her and then they'll be able to cast spells, but that's still something extra that they would have had to do, where if she wasn't on the field, they'd just be able to kind of do what they want. There's a lot of big summons running around, a lot of high cost stuff, and just being able to cancel that stuff can be kind of backbreaking, and she can just win games just by protecting your other stuff. You want to play her when other things are out that she has stuff to protect, because if she's just out by herself, she's not as scary really, but otherwise a great card. Then we chose to run the 3 CP Zidane over the 4 CP. I think the 3 CP is slightly overall better right now, but that doesn't mean that the 4 CP shouldn't see play. There are decks that will favor the 4 CP over the 3 CP. I think Earthwind is a great example of that. But however, in this deck, I think we want to be running the Thoughtseize, just being able to cast this within the first 2 to 3 turns and steal whatever your opponent is planning on casting is going to be really great. If you're playing against Mono Water, for example, just ripping that Facility out of their hands is going to feel amazing. Also, after your opponent's kind of search something to kind of prepare for the next turn, you can slam this down and just steal the thing they search, because, I mean, that's going to really hurt him and set him back as well. He's just overall really, really strong right now, and you want to see him early if possible because you want to rip their hand early. But again, even late, he's going to usually steal something and be relevant. Yeah, next is Barbarita. We talked about her kind of earlier. She's going to be able to just come into play and reduce something's power by to 1,000. That's printed power. So you can kind of play this with Chilinka, kill it. If Chilinka's already out, you play this. You can tap Alhanalim, kill it. There's just a lot of things that combo well with this. It can also let you kind of swing around forwards that would otherwise be a problem. You kind of play this and be like, okay, your guys are 1k. Now all you can do is chump block. Or you can kind of swing, force them to make what they think is a favorable block, and then drop Barbarita in main 2 to kill them off. She just does a lot of things, a lot of cool tricks that is just good for taking care of certain forwards. She can have trouble with anthems when anthems come into play, but a lot of our stuff is going to ping for 2k or more, so anthems shouldn't really be much of a factor here for us. Next we got Poram. We chose to run Poram in this deck over Layla Viking right now. By choosing Poram over Layla Viking, like I discussed in the previous video, it opens up more card slots to run other cards. Poram takes up 3 cards in your deck. Layla Viking is going to take up at least 4. And I don't really agree with running 2-2 right now. I think you want to be 3-3 is where you want to be at if you're running that package. But Poram's going to let us look at the top 3 and just grab a card. So we're still getting 1 card out of the deal. She's a burst, which is great. And you'll notice that's kind of a theme in this deck. It's pretty burst heavy. So the chances of you hitting bursts are pretty high. And then, yeah, her last ability just for 1 in activate, or 1 in dull, choose an action ability, cancel its effect, is going to be really relevant. Your opponent's going to have to constantly be aware that that's a thing. But as soon as she's been off for a turn, she's going to be able to cancel things like Star Sybil and all that stuff, which is going to really kind of hurt your opponent's plan. They have to kind of get rid of this smaller forward in order to be able to use those really high value abilities. Moving on, we have Yuri, arguably the best card that is in Opus 7. This card is just nuts. It's got a wall of text. Everything it does is pretty relevant. The worst thing it's going to do is draw you a card on the way out if you play it correctly. It's just an insane card. Once you get 3 backups down and you slam this down, the game just kind of changes, and it's hard for your opponent to play around this card. The only kind of negative is that we're running 3, so your hand can get gummed up with this, but it's not really that bad of a thing because that just means you have more Yuris if your other Yuri dies. Dulling and freezing is pretty unfair outside of ice, and being able to do that just to kind of move stuff out of the way on your opponent's turn to lead into your turn for attacking through is just pretty nuts. And you just kind of always leave Yuri and 3 backups open, or if you get, you know, the 3 backups of one color, 2 backups of the other with Yuri on the board, you're going to be able to use his ability twice. It's just crazy. He's probably the best light card we've ever seen, and the things he just does is nuts, and that's why you're seeing these decks pop up, and that's why the power level of these decks is very high. Next we got Sessile, just a one-of here. I didn't really want to run Barts in this deck. I know some versions of the deck do run Barts, but because we're running a little bit more water than I see in some other lists, I decided against that. But Barts is pretty viable here. But Sessile's going to be able to activate any 2 characters. It doesn't really matter that they're wind or not. And then once you get to the 5 points of damage, he's just a really good wall that forces their opponent to have a summon answer for the most part. Like, you're not really going to beat him in combat. And the fact that he's immune to abilities as well means that, you know, my opponent can't barb him. They can't outsit him. There's just a lot of things later in the game that you're not going to be able to do to Sessile. Diabolus obviously is a threat, but if they use a Diabolus on this guy, you're usually okay with it. You don't mind, but late game he can kind of stall the board. Then rounding out our forwards is going to be Cloud of Darkness. Again, another very strong water card. Once you've kind of built up a board, you can kind of slam this down, and power reduction is probably the best farm removal in the game. Sometimes, you know, it's not as great, but if you have an established board, this is going to let you usually push through for game. If it doesn't push through for game, it's going to threaten that power reduction the following turns as long as it stays alive and is able to attack. It's really good here. A lot of times our board is going to be like, you know, usually 3 wide or so. So slamming this down is going to be an 8k reduction if you play it on a board where you already have 3 forwards out. And it's going to be really good there. It's not as good in here because we're not running Layla Viking, and Layla Viking definitely makes Cloud of Darkness a lot better of a card. So that is something to think about. Like, if you feel like your Cloud of Darknesses aren't hitting as hard as you want, maybe taking Poram out for that Layla Viking package is going to be a good call. So yeah, onto the summon package now, and I think this is what makes this deck insane. The summons that this deck has access to are just nuts, and let's kind of go right into it and talk about why they're nuts. So first up, we have Valufor. This card with Yuna just does some absolutely absurd things. It combos with a ton of stuff that we're doing, you know, with Barbarita, with Chilinka, with Alhanalim, with Yuri, all the ping damage. Dealing the extra 3k is going to be really relevant. By itself, it just is going to kill a board of Layla Viking, which is really good to stop that kind of early aggression if your opponent goes for that game plan. And then once we have Yuna is when the absurd stuff really starts to happen. It's going to let us kind of use our backups to play something, and then for just 2 CP, deal 3k to all our opponent's stuff, and then ready all our backups. So the idea of this deck is that we're going to get to 5 backups, we're going to get to 4 backups, that threshold, ideally 5. And we're going to do really disgusting stuff with Valfor and Diabolus, and just have these crazy swing turns where we're casting a lot of CP, but very efficiently. And that's just what makes this deck so strong. After Valfor, we're going to have Fanfrit. I think this summon is also extremely powerful right now. Even though we're not running Layla Viking, it kind of forces your opponent to play around this. They have to play 2 forwards to answer a board of 1 or 2 forwards. You know, so because if we play 2 forwards and then our opponent tries to respond with 1 bigger forward and we play Fanfrit, then that's going to be advantageous for us. If our opponent plays a forward first and we cast Fanfrit, that's also advantageous for us. And then on top of that, this is just a burst that can hit as well, which is just crazy good. And then next up we have Choo-Choo landing Impure. This card really is ran because we're running Yuna, so it makes it a lot more efficient. It's a power reduction card that's going to draw us a card, so it lets us kind of win in combat and get a card off the deal. It can kill stuff if your opponent has enough things dull. You just have to be careful playing around things to where your opponent can reactivate stuff to kind of play around this as a combat trick. But this is also an EX burst, so the worst thing it's going to do off burst is draw you a card, unless your opponent has something untargetable on the board, and that's the only thing on board. So the next one is going to be Diabolus. It was unanimously voted by the whole returners and Hunter Nance as the best summon in the game, and I still stand by that. I think this card is nuts. I think this entire summon package is just crazy. Diabolus also, kind of like Valfor, does some very similar things. Allows you to basically play stuff for free. And then it's also going to just win you in combat again. You're going to be able to straight up break something at 5. You're going to, anything 4 or less, you're going to make it 1,000 power. Which also leads to combo into like your pingy stuff, so you can play a Diabolus into a Valfor, and you basically didn't spend anything if you're on 5 backups. I mean, you just had those 2 cards in hand. That was it. So yeah, again, like I said, they're going to get some really swingy turns with this summon package and just do super nutty stuff that you probably shouldn't be able to do. And then onto the backups. So let's go ahead and start out with Alhanalim, or as we like to call him, the tree, even though he's not a tree. So as soon as Yuri and Chelinka are out, this backup is going to be insane. You really only need one or the other, to be honest. Preferably Chelinka, just because he's going to just deal 3k to something, which is really good. Let you constantly swing up the curve. And just do some really nutty stuff. And then as soon as you have both of them out, it's just a 3k to the board pretty much, because of that buff that Chelinka is giving him. It's just a really good backup. You play it early, and then you kind of don't care after that. Like it's gonna do stuff. It's gonna gain value later, and it's just a really good turn 1 backup. And then speaking of good turn 1 backups, we also have Archer. That's another card. You just play it early, it's great, and you forget about it until you have to break something. Again, those swingy turns that I was talking about earlier, where you're playing Valfor, where you're playing Diabolus, you can do all that stuff and then reactivate, and then after you kill everything on your opponent's side of the board, you can also kill a backup on the side of the board. It's just really good. You could even up this to 3, I think, but I kind of like it at 2 right now. And then these next 2 backups are going to kind of be a big part of what makes the deck function. So first up, we're going to have Riku. Really what we're trying to get out of this Riku is her name. It lets us do the stuff that we need to do with Pain to make her free and reactivate everything. But on top of that, she's going to kind of force your opponent to really think about the long game. Because if the game goes too long, you're going to win before they will. Because if you constantly just keep milling them, they're going to deck out before you. You aren't going to win oftentimes like that, but in any kind of long game, that has to be something in your mind and your opponent's mind that this card can just kind of single-handedly win the game for you. On top of that, she does have an S, so you can get the extra copies out of your hand to draw a card and mill for 2. And then you also have to think about when you're playing against like Sessile or things that are trying to stack the top of their deck, you can use this to your advantage and mill after they've kind of stacked with Ephemeral Summoner and things like that to play around those cards. Then the next card is going to be Yuna, the R, Yuna from Opus 1. All she does is make our water summons cost 1 less, which is extremely good. You'll notice there's not a lot of water cards in this list. It's mostly wind heavy. It's just enough water to be able to do kind of what we need to do with the water cards. You still want to get down Yuna as early as you can to get that source of water and to make your summons cheaper, because it's going to just start being extremely good. And then also it's going to do, you put your Valor online, it's going to put your Pain online, and all those great things. And then this is kind of a tech card slot. We have Aerith. She was also in our mono win list as well. She just shuts off a lot of things that are seeing a lot of play right now, like Sessile, like Snow. And you just kind of slam this down against those matchups, and she's going to probably win you the game because she just shut off a lot, maybe a win condition for them. She's only one of those, so you can't really bank on seeing her all the time, but, in those matchups, you just want to make sure you hold on to her, and if you do, it's 2 out of 3 or whatever, and you see that they're playing that matchup, it might be something you want a hard mull for. Then we have Alaria. It's a burst. It searches for Yuri and Chelinka. We don't really need to say much more than that. You're going to play this down pretty early. You're probably going to go get Yuri or Chelinka, and, you're just going to go from there. I mean, it does everything that you want to be doing with the deck. Those are 2 very big cards in this deck, and this searches both and is a burst. Then we have Echo. That's kind of a modal backup that has EX burst. The key thing is this burst. We probably wouldn't be playing this card if it didn't have burst on it. A lot of times we're not going to cast this card. But if we do, the worst thing it's going to do is let us look at the top and draw that card more than likely. We can do some cheeky things with playing it, activating a backup that we've already used. Maybe say like Alhanalim or Riku to do extra ping damage, or mill for an extra card. But other than that, I guess not too much more to be said here. You can use it, I guess, post attack if you want to activate a forward to keep it up for defense, but I don't think it's really worth doing that. But if it comes off burst, pretty great. Then we have Merle Webb, the only other water backup other than Yuna. It's a burst. Again, it's going to draw 2 cards and let us discard a card. It's going to let us kind of fuel through our deck, see the cards that we need to see. A lot of times, again, you're not going to play this down the board unless you have to. But if it comes off burst, it's going to be really good. You're going to net some cards. And if you have to play it as a water source, it doesn't feel that bad. Yeah, and then our last backup on the list is Shinra. It's an EX burst that's going to search for Pain. So if we have to, we can search for the Searcher Pain and kind of get a little train going to search out our Gullwings if we need to. And then again, the reason we're running this over Brother is because it's a burst. So if it comes off top, we're going to get that extra value. Again, you're probably not hard casting this most games because you want to make room for a lot of your other more priority backups. But if you do, it doesn't feel that bad, and it's going to get you a card. So it's, not terrible. And yeah, so that's the Wind Water deck. Could arguably be the best deck in the format right now. It's definitely up there. I mean, the power level on it is extremely strong. There are definitely other builds in this. This isn't the end-all be-all build. There's some Sid 2 builds that are also extremely powerful. You just have to kind of cater more towards Sid 2 and run the Evokers. You don't have room for these backups. But I think, to me, this is the best version currently. So, let us know in the comments whether you like it or hate it. Maybe give it a try. Let us know how it goes at your locals or a big event that's coming up that you're playing in. Yeah, and then other than that, just make sure you like, favorite, subscribe to our content. Hope to do more of this in the future, and look forward to seeing these next meta deck breakdowns that we're going to continue to do until the reunion, which we hope to see everybody there. So yeah, with that being said, see you later. Peace.